I was hoping that it would actually work tonight. Um, we have the pleasure of having Christie Suchora. She's the county executive director for the Farm Service Agency for Muskingum and Morgan County. She's taken time out of her evening to join us tonight to go over some of the drought programs that are available through Farm Service Agency because of the disaster designation by Secretary Vilsack a couple weeks ago. So with that, Christie, I will turn the meeting over to you, and we'll see where things go.
Okie dokie. All right. So thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We've got several different programs that we, Farm Service Agency, is offering. Many of these programs became permanent programs with the 2014 Farm Bill, and they went under a little bit of a metamorphosis in the 2018 Farm Bill, and they actually did some different things, made them a little better. But they're still undergoing a lot of transitions and a lot of changes, but these are permanent programs as written by Congress. And so it gives us a lot more to offer than past programs where we always had to rely on Congress granting something well after the fact. So these are able to get dollars in hands of the producers much quicker. As a matter of fact, we've already issued payments for this first program that I'm going to talk about, and that's Livestock Forage Disaster Program. So I'm going to scroll through these screens really quickly. The purpose of it is to compensate you for eligible livestock because you have suffered a grazing loss due to drought intensity. And this has to occur during the normal grazing period for the specific type of grazing land. We have two grazing types that we deal with in Ohio: improved pasture and native pasture. For the most part, everyone's pasture is considered improved pasture. The drought monitor is what triggers this program. We have to have 8 weeks consecutive at a D2, or if we hit D3 or D4 at any point in time, that triggers payment activity and program activity, and it opens. So, and right now, both counties, Muskingum and Morgan, we hit on D3 on August 20th. And then on, I believe it was September 4th, we became D4. All right, so right now, that means that we've got 4 months worth of eligibility for payment for our folks. If for some reason this drought continues or intensifies, I guess we can't get any worse than D4, but if it does continue and we have 4 weeks of D4, and these do not have to be consecutive weeks, it will trigger 5 months worth of payments. 5 months worth of payments is the maximum amount that we will be able to issue in any case. Okay, so beginning date of the drought event is determined by the drought monitor, and the counties automatically, if your county hits anywhere within that county, you automatically receive eligibility for the entire county. There's a website there that you can go to that will determine whether or not you or your county that you choose actually is considered eligible for this program. It's updated weekly, and as I said, we've got improved pasture and native pasture. There is also a public FSA eligibility tool that you can use if you would like to go into. You can check and see if your county's eligible, which counties are eligible, if your particular location, whatever it may be. There's some other links in there that will tell you about the drought monitor triggers, and it'll tell you about eligible livestock, eligible producers, payments, enrollment, and payment rates. An eligible livestock producer means producer who, in addition to the other requirements, is an individual or a legal entity who is the owner, operator, landlord, tenant, or sharecropper who shares in a risk of producing a crop. So you must have ownership in this livestock in order to be eligible for the program. And the livestock has to be available for marketing from the farm, and you should have a share in that crop of where the livestock's been produced. We do have a payment limitation. $125,000 is the maximum amount anyone will receive. And you must have an adjusted gross income of less than $500,000 in order to qualify for the program participation. You must have owned the livestock during the 60 days prior to the beginning of the disaster event. So when we talk about that, our disaster event started on August 20th. So that meant that you had to have owned those animals from June 20th onward. So you could also own or rent an eligible share of land located in a county affected by the drought disaster. These programs that we're dealing with right now require that you file what we call an FSA 578, which is basically your acreage report or report of acres. That includes pasture and permanent pastures. The software will not work without those acres being recorded in the system, and it reads off of that. Normal filing deadlines for this purpose is July 15th. However, we do have late file provisions that people can late file to be able to participate in the program. However, there is a fee that is associated with that. I'll tell you about that in a little bit. Eligible livestock has to be grazing livestock. And we're doing this program by administrative county is where you will actually make your application, but the software will read from physical county. So if you are a multi-county producer and you have livestock grazing in two different counties, say Morgan and Perry or Muskingum and Licking, the software reads the location and notices that. Just about everyone is eligible, except there is a limitation if you are a contract grower. If you are doing that on a weight gain or a cost per head per day per month basis or an animal unit basis, that is not able to be, you're not able to qualify for the program. So we have to review the contracts that you have with your contract with your growers out there. So you will be required to submit a copy of that contract at the time of application. Talked a little bit here about the covered livestock. Has to be income, is dependent on actual weight gain, is not covered. So as I said, we have to have a copy of that contract in order for us to determine whether or not you meet the eligibility requirements for that. It's a little more just weight gain such there. So the animals that we're covering, these are grazing animals. They must be or they must be weaned animals, I should say. They can be both adult and non-adults. So for like a beef and dairy cattle, what we consider an adult animal is an adult cow that is calved, a heifer that has been bred, and your bull that is used for breeding purposes. Those are the category for adult livestock, beef and dairy. Same with buffalo. And your non-adults are going to be open heifers, steers. Once again, they have to be weaned, they have to be on pasture, and they weigh more than 500 pounds. And then our final category is weaned livestock or weaned calves that weigh less than 500 pounds. There's also some provisions for alpacas, deer, elk, llamas, reindeer, equine, sheep, goats, ostriches. We have to have the animal meet the definition of commercial use. So there's a lot of discussion about whether or not your pleasure horse meets the definition of commercial use. So you have to be able to show us that somehow these will meet that definition. Grazing animals means any livestock that receives at least 50% of its net energy requirements from the consumption of grass, legumes, and forbs. And let's see here. You've got to have owned the livestock. You have to be either entered into a contract to purchase the livestock or be a contract grower of the livestock. They must be maintained for commercial use or producing livestock products for commercial use, such as milk from a dairy. Recreational restriction was removed. So it's a lot of this is on a case by case basis that we have to review that. Mitigated livestock that were sold or disposed of due to the drought can also be claimed, but you must have that must be within the 60 days preceding the disaster event. So we're looking at that same window of basically June 20th to August 20th. If you sold livestock because of the drought, then they would be eligible. Eligible mitigated livestock would have normally been livestock that was grazing on those grazing lands. They had to be sold within the 60 days before the beginning of the drought. And they have to meet all the other criteria for the program. Ineligible livestock is livestock that's produced or maintained for reasons other than commercial use. Can't be free roaming livestock. It cannot be livestock used for racing or wagering, and livestock used for hunting or by consumption of the owner. So in other words, the steer that you're feeding out for your own freezer, it's not eligible. Livestock that were or would have been in a feedlot on the beginning date of the qualifying disaster event are also not eligible. Livestock that are not weaned and livestock that do not meet the definition of grazing animals. I had a call the other day wanting to know why chickens weren't eligible in a different program that we were offering, and it's because chickens are not a grazing animal. So that basically any animals not included in the paragraph 25 of the Livestock Forage Disaster Program Handbook. The land has to be physically located in a county with qualifying drought. It could be native pasture or pasture planted specifically for the purpose of grazing. So if you would say, a lot of people take and after they've harvested their corn, they turn the livestock out on those stalks to be grazed. That is not considered an eligible grazing practice for this program. So the intended use for our purposes must have been reported for grazing. There have been several eligibility requirements. If you do not own the ground that you are running these animals on, you must have a written lease or rental agreement. And we've got a couple that are doing stuff. We don't have federal lands that are grazed in Morgan or Muskingum County, but we do have state lands that are grazed and possibly subleased. We will have to have copies of those leases, and the leases must specifically address the grazing option or pasture in them. So land that's enrolled in GRP, EQIP, or other conservations, if ceded to one of the eligible crops and grazing is not prohibited during the normal grazing period, are also eligible for LFP. Acreage that's enrolled in Conservation Reserve Program, except for the Conservation Reserve Program grasslands, are not eligible. and acreage that is enrolled in WRP, that's Wetlands Reserve Program, are not eligible. Small grains intended for harvest as forage or seed are not eligible, and first year seeded biennial or perennial seedings of pastures are not eligible, and neither are cover crops. Double cropping combinations not approved by the state committee. Acreage is intended for grain. I already mentioned that. Grazing land that's leased under any condition that calls for a weight gain or cost per head per month per day basis. You don't care about the PIA fine. That's our improper payment act stuff, but it's one of the findings that they had on that. Normal grazing period ends on October 30th. And for our program purposes, everything when we load these applications is considered 1 acre per adult cow. All other species are given a value of that. So the software does most of the calculations for you. These are Ohio standards. We have a total of 100 or 214 days of grazing that we can do on native pastures, 214 days of grazing that we can do on improved, and 92 days of grazing that we can do on forage sorghum. But that would have had to have had an intended use of grazing. You must have an acreage report on file for this program to be able to qualify. As I said, the software is going to read those acres, where they were and what they are. And if you do not have your grazing reported, you will be required to pay a $31 per FSA farm fee to late file that in order to make your application eligible. We're also going to look at trees. So I know a lot of people are pasturing through the trees, but there really is no nutritional value in those trees. So we will, the example on your left, you'll see that trees and buildings, they need to be separated from the rangeland. So you will not be able to count those acres. If it's a sporadic tree here and there, or a small little grove of trees, like the example on the right, that is fine. It's acceptable. We had a meeting today. We talked a lot about this, and for years, everyone's used a 5% rule, but nobody can find where it's written. But that seems to be the ruling that most of us have been going by, is if there's 5% or more tree cover, then we need to delineate the trees out of the pasture. So this is just another example of pasture ground. And there you can see where we have gone in and we've actually delineated the trees out of that. And that one little light shaped body, that's a water body. Okay, there is some acreage tolerance. It's the larger of 1 acre or 5% of the total reported acreage, not to exceed 50 acres. The software will it'll recognize that also. We don't need to be calculating that. Common questions that we have when people are certifying. If a producer both hays and grazes the same area of land, which intended use should it be? Historically, it's been that the crop's first use is what is certified. So in other words, if you use that ground and your first use is hay, this cannot be counted towards your grazing. The software doesn't recognize grazing as a secondary use. And obviously, if you let the cattle or the animals out to graze the ground before it's hayed, you probably won't have hay. Let's see here. Grazing land has to be reported at the time that it's supplying. So yes, it's a hard stop for us. We can't go any further in the software without that crop report. So we have to have that. See, okay. A lot of people were asking if there was a waiver for county committees to approve the late file fee. No, there are no special provisions due to a disaster declaration. This waiver, for this waiver to be approved by COC, it must meet all criteria in the paragraph. And basically, that only exception is if you say you're hospitalized, or, and this has happened, it happened in the upper Midwest a few years back. Roads were washed out due to flooding. People were not able to physically get to a county office. So there has to be some pretty extreme extenuating circumstances in order for you not to have that late file fee waived. Our normal carrying capacity, I had already mentioned to that. It's in Ohio, we have just the two. They both are one animal per 1 acre. And our normal grazing period is April 1st to October 30th. Oh, let's see here. So here's how they convert the animal units. So an adult dairy cow says that it requires 2.6 units in order to sustain that animal, where an adult beef cow is 1 unit. Horses are 0.74. Non-adults on the dairy, beef, buffalo, beef cattle, those go down to 0.75. The other thing that we see a lot of, sheeps and goats, that's 0.25. Okay, so if you've picked up one of our fact sheets, you're going to see a payment rate for livestock forage disaster program of $52 and change. And everybody thinks, oh, wow, I'm going to get $52.56 for every adult animal that I have. Well, you do initially. However, it is calculated at 60% of that. So what the software is going to do is going to take your animal numbers, and it's going to multiply it out, and then it's going to reduce it by 60%. And it's also going to go through and do calculations based on the number of acres that you pastured. And you will get paid on either the units generated by the livestock, or the units generated by the acreage. So, supporting documentation. You have to have timely filed an FSA 578. Got to file the application. We have to have lease agreements if you're renting the pasture. If you do not have a formal lease agreement, we do have a form, the CCC 855, that you can take and have the person that you're leasing the ground from sign it. The names have to match. So in other words, if Jim Brown is the owner, Jim Brown has to be the one that is signing it. If Dylan Kinsey is the operator, Dylan Kinsey has to be the one that is signing it as the lessee. We have to have our contract grower agreements, and you have to file all eligibility forms as required by 6PL, which is our payment limitation ruling. Then the final bullet there says any additional information as requested by COC. So COC is our county committee. Our county committee is asking that each producer bring us some sort of records to substantiate what their livestock numbers are. If you're utilizing an ear tagging system, then we'd like a listing of the ear tag numbers and what they correspond to. So if A43 is a cow, just write down A43 cow. In the case if you're using ear tags and you're missing one or two or whatever, we just ask that you write no ear tag Hereford cow, or no ear tag black cow, or no ear tag black baldy. that type of thing. If you're not utilizing an ear tagging system, however you identify your animals, so that we've got something in writing that helps to substantiate. We have what we call verifiable records and reliable records. Verifiable records are records such as animals that you ran through a sale barn, vaccination records, registrations for your animals if you have a registered herd. Those type of things are all considered verifiable. Reliable records are the records that you as a producer keep yourselves. So if you are not keeping any sort of record, our county committee is asking that you create a record so that we can use that to help substantiate the numbers that you're claiming. This will, the program requires that you maintain the records for 3 years. And if you are pulled for spot check, produce the records. We're hoping this circumvents a lot of that. So we've had some people, they don't keep any type of records. They've been bringing us photographs of their animals. And when I'm going through the files and reviewing them, and I see the photographs of the herd, well, it makes me smile, and I kind of like that. And it makes me happy to look at cows. But we kind of realized that was kind of a bit of a paper burden, and we were burning through a lot of paper to print out all the photographs of the animals. So we don't ask that you photograph your herd anymore. So, okay. All right, so everyone will get an estimated calculated payment report when they apply for the program. And it's going to present a whole lot of numbers, and you're going to look down through it and you're going to say, what is all this and what is it doing? So basically, the first part of it is going to calculate out based on your livestock numbers. And then it's going to go through and it's going to calculate out your feed costs. And you will be paid on the lesser of. So if your animal numbers generate a smaller dollar figure than your land numbers do, then you'll be paid on the lesser of the animal numbers. If you're in an overgrazing situation, software is going to know that, and it's going to give you a lower payment based on the grazing and the overgrazing. So it's just, these are just sheets, but when it comes down, the final number will be the last thing that's on the sheet, and we'll show that to you. And that number, that will be the amount you get. The only thing that is, it will be reduced by the 5.7% sequestration fee. So what's this boil down to? One adult cow right now, over the 4-month period, we did the liberty of taking the $52.56 and multiplying it out by the 4 months, and then reducing it by the program factor 60%, so that you're going to receive 60% of that value. And then we applied the sequestration fee. So basically, each adult animal is going to net you around $118. Okay, let's see here. I already spoke before. Let's see here. Cannot exceed 5 times the same coverage, 60%. So basically, it's 5 months of payments. If this drought continues into next year and we are still at a D3 or D4 at the first of the year, it's a new program benefit year, and we start a new application process. Let's see here. We've got some things. So we're going to have to know where your livestock is if you're running livestock in multiple counties. So we'll talk to each producer about that. We've had a few come in, but for the most part, most of the ones we've dealt with, their herds are maintained in separate counties, so it's made it a little easier for us. But when your cows are running across county lines, we might have to do some manual adjustments on your application to make them all eligible. And depending upon what county they're running in, a like Licking didn't hit the D3 until last week, so they are only eligible for three months worth of payments, where Muskingum is eligible for four. Okay. There is a drought payment calculator that we can use. I haven't had a chance yet to look at it. I'll probably try to do that tomorrow sometime and see what it does. So, and yes, you must apply through our office in order to receive program benefits for this. There is not an online application that you can do. And let's see, we've already talked about the requirements in your supporting documentation. We can, if you have a herd in another county and it's not your administrative county, we can do nationwide customer service and assist anyone, anywhere. Okay. You'll also be required to, within 30 days of the end of the calendar year in which the grazing has occurred, complete the application. So that's basically what this is saying, is that's our deadline. So January 30th is the deadline to apply for this program. You have until then. Physical location, we've talked about that. You have to have a share in the livestock. We've talked about that. LFP for ongoing drought. Yeah, we'll cross this bridge if we come to it, I guess. So, if for some reason we've now, as I said, we've started issuing payments, and we're issuing 4 months worth of payments. If we are at a D4 for at least 4 weeks, and it's not consecutive, doesn't have to be consecutive, but if we have D4 for at least 4 weeks during the grazing period, then you will automatically get another payment. So we still have 6 weeks, or I think roughly 6 weeks left to the grazing period. So there is potential that we could possibly issue another payment down the road. Okay. There are no late file provisions for applying for this program. You must apply by the January 30th deadline. If you come in on January 31st or February 2nd, we cannot help you. We cannot take the application. We can take the application, but it will be deemed ineligible, and you will not be able to receive any benefits. So that is that. So right now, the other program we're offering is Emergency Livestock Assistance Program. Well, I'll quickly touch on LFP or LIP, Livestock Indemnity Program. Drought is not an eligible cause of loss for livestock indemnity program. Livestock indemnity is where we pay you for livestock that died as a result of a natural disaster. You have the ability to haul water to your livestock. So therefore, drought is not an eligible cause of loss for that program. So we'll move on. We're not going to even talk about it anymore. Other categories, or the other program that we're dealing with right now, is Emergency Livestock Assistance Program. As drought conditions becoming apparent in our area, so we'll take a moment to talk about this. We've got drought so we'll touch on this too. Drought is not an event for honeybees or farm-raised fish. So we're back to just grazing livestock for eligibility for this program. So the drought has an eligible during the normal grazing period for grazing animals, resulting from additional cost incurred to transport livestock feed or livestock for additional mileage above normal. So if you're normally transporting feed and you're normally transporting water and you're normally transporting livestock, you're not eligible for this. But if for some reason your spring has run dry, the pond that you watered out of is dried up, then, and you are hauling water, and by hauling water, I mean you're putting water in into a container and moving it from one location to another, then you can qualify for this program. We, on the water hauling, it is based on the number of gallons that you haul. It is 10 cents per gallon, but that gets reduced also, where you're only going to receive 60% of that. And then the final payment will be reduced by the 5.7% sequestration fee. So it's probably, you'll probably realize 5.59 cents per gallon, basically. What we're asking producers to do is, starting with the date of the qualifying disaster event, which is August 20th, if they are hauling water, if you were hauling water in July, sorry, we can't help you because that was not considered a disaster at that time. So from August 20th on, you need to start keeping track of the date that you hauled and the number of gallons that you hauled. We're taking manual applications for this program right now. It can go a total of 150 days or until the drought ends. So what will happen, because 150 days takes us into January, and the program ends at the end of the current calendar year. These programs are calendar year programs. We're going to reach out to you either when the drought ends or at the end of the year, whichever comes first, and tell you it's now time to finalize your payment and it's time to bring in your records so that we can complete your application for payment for the water hauling. If this drought continues into next year, then we will do the same thing. We will have we will start another sign up period, but it will require you to sign up for 2025. Let's see here. What else? Okay. So if you're having to supplement existing water sources, but you're pumping from one well or a trough, or water is dried up, or you ran water over the ground somehow, that's not going to qualify. So you have to physically put that water into a container and move it from one location to the other. We do not care what the source of the water is. So you're not going to have to prove and have receipts for water that you purchased from one of the watering pumping stations that are around the different communities. And if you've got a pond on your property and you're pumping water out of that pond and putting it into the truck or into a tank and taking it to another location, that's considered transportation. But if you're pumping the water out of that pond and running a line across the ground into another paddock or pasture, that is not considered eligible. So I hope that's clear. And let's see, the other thing, transportation of feed. So a lot of people are saying, well, I'm buying hay now. And once they want to know if they can get reimbursed for that. No, that is not eligible under our program. However, the transportation costs associated with buying that hay are eligible. So if you have to run to Mount Hope and you buy a load of hay and you bring 2 truckloads of hay back, you will be paid by the loaded miles and by the truckload. And a truckload could be anywhere from a pickup truck up to a semi. that starts at $6.60 per mile. It will also have that 60% payment factor applied to it. So that goes down. And then the 5.7% sequestration fee also will be applied to it. If you're having to go, and now if you normally have to go buy hay, and that's part of your normal practice, then that's not compensatable. But if if you never buy hay and you have to go purchase it and haul it, then we can compensate you for those transportation costs. What you're going to need for us is you're going to need a receipt from who you bought it from. And if you hire someone to haul that, your receipt better have a transportation fee associated with it. Because if your receipt just says, 500 small squares of alfalfa and there's no transportation fee, we're assuming that that transportation fee is built into the cost of that hay. So you're going to have mileage, the date that you hauled, and the receipts to back up the purchase. Okay. There's a 25, anything local, 25 miles or more is what we're considering not local. I've not loaded an application yet, so I'm not sure if we have to deduct the 25 miles off of your hauling or if the software does. I would like to think the software will deduct it, but until I run an actual application, I will not know. And it limits out at 1,000 miles. So we've already had people go to Michigan to purchase hay. They purchased a couple truckloads. They got their receipts. They brought their stuff in, but we were still waiting on a few supporting documents from them. So I'll know a little more once we run all that through. But mileage, date they drove it, and receipts to back up the purchase. And if you hired it to be done, your bill of lading or whatever it may be needs to include that transportation fee in order for you to be considered eligible for that. You cannot be paid for this. So this is where why we have these separate programs. So you can't be paid for the same losses under ELAP and LFP. And because LFP is compensating you for the pasture losses, ELAP cannot. So that's why there is no money to compensate you for buying hay out of a normal time. Okay. So the actual livestock forage program is what is your compensation for the pasture losses and to help make up for those costs that you have, incurred because of that. There's also, if you have to transport cattle, same kind of rules apply. Over 25 miles, under 1,000. We do have a few where people have had to move livestock from one county to another. So if you're doing that, you're going to have to keep track of the miles. You're going to have to keep track of the number of head and the dates that was done. So that's pretty much it for my presentation. So